Imagine for a moment that the story you were told about Jesus is only the surface layer, that beneath the familiar tale of miracles, morality, and salvation, there are other messages that were hidden in parables, buried in apocryphal gospels, whispered in early mystical traditions, and then dismissed, condemned, or quietly erased. What if Jesus didn't come only to start a religion, but to awaken a different kind of knowledge inside you? Not just believe and be saved, but a living inner knowing that reveals the nature of reality, the soul, and the divine itself. A truth so powerful that if it were widely understood, it could break the spell of fear, control, and spiritual dependency that has shaped human history for centuries. In this video, we're going to explore those hidden teachings, the sayings attributed to Jesus in Gnostic and mystical traditions, the phrases everyone has heard, but almost no one has really listened to. And by the end, we'll arrive at what may be his most radical message of all, that the kingdom of God is not a distant place you go after death, but a state of consciousness you can enter here and now by discovering the divine spark within yourself. If you feel that the official version of the story has always been missing something, you're exactly who this video is for. And if you're new here, this is Gnostic Codex. We dive into the hidden teachings, the suppressed texts, and the deeper layers of spiritual tradition. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing, leaving a like to support this work, and share your reflections in the comments. I'd love to hear what this awakening means for you. Now, let's begin. For most people, Jesus is presented as a figure of love, sacrifice, and forgiveness. That image is true, but incomplete. Behind his public words lies a deeper current, a path of inner awakening, a call to self-knowledge, a confrontation with the illusion of the ego and the structures of power built around it. In many spiritual streams, Jesus is not seen only as a moral teacher, but as an enlightened one, someone who knew the great mysteries of the soul and the cosmos, and who encoded them in simple phrases for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. To understand why so much of this was lost, we have to remember something most people never hear in church. In the first centuries, there wasn't just one Christianity. There were many. Different communities preserved different sayings, stories, and interpretations of Jesus. Some emphasized external authority and belief. Others emphasized inner knowledge, direct experience, and liberation from spiritual ignorance. Over time, as religious and political power merged, a selection had to be made. Some texts were declared orthodox. Others were pushed to the margins, banned, or simply left to disappear. Among those marginalized writings, one stands out, the Gospel of Thomas. It's not a narrative gospel. There are no miracles, no crucifixion, no resurrection story. It is a collection of sayings, short, sharp, sometimes mysterious, attributed to Jesus. And many of them sound very different from the Jesus of conventional Sunday sermons. One of the most striking is this: if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. What does that really mean? This is not a call to blind belief. It's a call to inner revelation. Jesus is pointing to something already inside you, a sacred potential, a divine spark, a buried truth. If you bring it to light, if you recognize it, embody it, live from it, it becomes your liberation. If you ignore it, suppress it, or let the world bury it in fear and distraction, that same inner power can turn against you, showing up as confusion, suffering, self-betrayal. In other words, your salvation is not something handed down from outside. It is something awakened from within. This echoes a teaching found in other esoteric traditions. As above, so below. As within, so without. The outer world mirrors the inner state. The path to truth is not found only in temples, books, or institutions. It is found by turning inward and aligning with what is most real inside you. Jesus hinted at exactly this when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you." For most of history, people have been told that the kingdom is a place above the clouds, a distant reward after death for those who obey. But Jesus speaks of it as something already present, accessible to those who seek with sincerity and courage. At the same time, he speaks again and again about losing your life to find it. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Taken literally, this sounds like a call to martyrdom. At a deeper level, it's an invitation to die to the false self, the ego built on roles, status, fear, comparison, and attachment to the material world. The life you must lose is the identity that keeps you chained to illusion. The life you find is your true nature, what some mystics call the Christ consciousness within. Early Gnostic Christians understood this very clearly. For them, gnosis, inner knowing, was the key to salvation. Not simply believing that Jesus died and rose again, but awakening the same divine principle that lived in him, inside themselves. They saw Jesus as the one who came to remind human beings of the spark they carry from the source, and to expose the systems that profit from keeping them in ignorance. According to Gnostic texts, Jesus even shared deeper teachings privately with prepared disciples, knowing that not everyone was ready to understand. He hinted at this in the canonical Gospels themselves. In Mark, he says, "To you has been given the mystery of the kingdom of God, but to those outside, everything is in parables." Why speak in parables? Because true knowledge cannot simply be dumped on an unwilling mind. It has to be discovered, recognized, received. Otherwise, it is rejected, mocked, or twisted into something it was never meant to be. That's why he also said, "Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine," not as an insult, but as a warning. Sacred insight is wasted, even destroyed, when forced on those not yet ready to hold it. So where did Jesus draw from? His message did not appear in a spiritual vacuum. He arrived in a region where currents of wisdom were already flowing. Jewish mystical traditions, communities like the Essenes, living in simplicity, purity, and inner discipline near the Dead Sea. Echoes of Egyptian, Hermetic, and even Eastern wisdom moving along ancient trade routes. The Essenes, for example, emphasized purification, meditation, and inner connection with the divine. They believed in awakening the spirit, not just following rules on the surface. This resonates deeply with Jesus' words, "The kingdom of God is within you." Some later traditions and scholars have suggested that in his so-called hidden years, Jesus may have traveled, learned, and encountered other schools of wisdom, from teachings about compassion and the illusory nature of the ego, to the Hermetic idea that the universe is mental, that reality reflects the state of consciousness. Whether or not those specific stories are literally true, the parallels are undeniable. The Buddha spoke of transcending the illusion of the self. Vedanta speaks of Atman and Brahman, the soul and the absolute, as ultimately one. Hermetic wisdom says that God is mind, and the universe is a reflection of that mind. Jesus, in his own language and context, points to the same direction. Everything you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. This is not about childish wish fulfillment. It is about understanding the creative power of consciousness, aligning inner faith, intention, and being with the deeper order of reality. His parables often hide this dimension. Take the parable of the sower. A man sows seeds, but some fall on rocks, some among thorns, some on good soil. On the surface, it's a story about faith. Look deeper, and it becomes a map of awareness. The seed is knowledge. The soil is the state of the mind and heart. A closed, hardened mind cannot let truth take root. A mind choked with worries and attachments suffocates what it receives. But a mind open, spacious, receptive, that is good soil, where inner knowledge can grow and transform. When he says, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you," he is not describing a passive religion where you sit and wait. He is describing an active quest. Truth doesn't fall into your lap while you cling to comfort. You must ask, you must seek, you must knock. You must be willing to let old beliefs die. And that is dangerous, not to God, but to systems built on control. Because what happens if people realize that the divine does not live only in temples? The kingdom is not only in a distant heaven. The true church begins in the interior of the heart. They become very hard to control. Throughout history, every time a teacher arose who pointed people inward, who reminded them of their own direct connection with the source, that teacher eventually clashed with the structures of power. Jesus was no exception. He threatened both religious and political authorities not because he encouraged chaos, but because he removed the monopoly on the divine. He taught that the presence of God is not owned by any institution, and that no human authority can stand between the soul and its source. That is why, over centuries, his most mystical and liberating words have often been softened, spiritualized away, or buried under layers of doctrine. But they're still there, for those willing to listen. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. What truth? Not just the truth of a story about him, but the truth of your own being. The realization that I and the Father are one is not a statement of ego, but a revelation of the unity between the deepest self and the divine. In many traditions, the same idea appears. Atman is Brahman. The image of God is within. The divine is closer to you than your own breath. Jesus points to this when he says, "The kingdom of God does not come with observation. They will not say, 'Look, here it is,' or 'There it is.' For behold, the kingdom of God is within you." The kingdom is not a distant location in space. It is a state of consciousness, a way of seeing and being, in which separation dissolves and the divine presence becomes real, here and now. In the Gospel of Thomas, one of the most esoteric sayings is, "When you make the two one, and when you make the inner as the outer and the outer as the inner, then you will enter the kingdom." This is the language of inner alchemy. It speaks of unifying opposites, matter and spirit, conscious and unconscious, human and divine. The medieval alchemists echoed this in symbolic form, transforming lead into gold as a metaphor for transforming the dense ego into awakened spirit. In Jewish mysticism, there is the idea of restoration and healing of the soul. In Taoism, the harmony of yin and yang. In all of them, the same pattern: integration, balance, union. Seen through this lens, Jesus' death and resurrection are not only historical events, but symbols of an inner process. The crucifixion, the falling apart of the false identity, the letting go of attachments and illusions. The resurrection, the rising of a new consciousness rooted in unity with the divine. This is why he says, "Whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." To lose your life is to surrender the ego's grip. To find it is to awaken as what you truly are. The final secret, if there is one, is not a hidden code in a book. It is this: the barrier between you and God was never built by God. It was built by fear, by conditioning, by misunderstanding, and by systems that benefit when you forget who you are. The walls are internal. The gate is internal. And the key has always been inside your own heart. So the real question is not, did Jesus hide a secret teaching somewhere out there? The real question is, am I willing to live the teaching he already gave, to look within, to face what I fear, to let the false self die, and to discover the kingdom that has been inside me all along? Because knowing this intellectually changes very little. Experience is what transforms. So as we end, I invite you to turn his words into a personal question. Where in my life am I still living from fear instead of love? Where am I clinging to a small identity instead of the deeper truth of my being? Where am I waiting for something outside me to save me, instead of awakening the spark within? Jesus once said, "The works that I do, you will do also, and greater works than these." He wasn't glorifying himself. He was pointing to what becomes possible when a human being fully remembers their divine origin. The kingdom is not simply later. It is now. Not somewhere else. Here, not only in a chosen few, but in every soul that dares to look within and walk the path of inner truth. If this stirred something in you, that's not an accident. That's recognition. Let that remembrance grow. And if you'd like to keep exploring these hidden layers of the teachings of Jesus and the Gnostics, stay with us here on Gnostic Codex, exposing the false light, remembering who you are,